Today's video isn't just about steel and concrete. It's a tale of progress, engineering marvels, the ever-changing needs of a growing city, and a life-changing disaster for the city of Baltimore. I'm your host, Evan, and today we're going to take a deep dive into the fascinating history of what was one of Baltimore's most iconic structures, the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Our story begins in the mid-20th century. Picture Baltimore in the 1950s. A bustling city with a growing population and a booming industrial economy. But there was a problem. The city was choking on its own success. Traffic congestion had become a nightmare, with existing roads and bridges struggling to cope with the increasing number of vehicles. Now imagine it's 1960, and you're a commuter in Baltimore. You're sitting in your car, inching forward in a sea of honking horns and exhaust fumes. The Baltimore Harbor Tunnel opened just 3 years earlier, and it's already overwhelmed. The city's other bridges are packed to capacity. It's clear that something needs to change. The Baltimore Beltway, also known as Interstate 695, was being planned as a solution to the traffic problem. This highway would encircle Baltimore City, allowing traffic to bypass the congested downtown area. But for this beltway to work effectively, it needed a way to cross the Patapsco River. That's where the Key Bridge comes in. The Maryland State Road Commission, which was the agency responsible for overseeing road and bridge projects in the state at the time, recognized the urgent need for this new crossing. They saw it as a critical piece of infrastructure that would not only ease traffic congestion, but also boost economic development by improving access to different parts of the Baltimore metro area. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my deep dives into history. The Maryland State Road Commission had originally planned to build a second tunnel between Hawkins Point and Solers Point. But when bidding for the project opened in 1970, the bids were significantly more than what was expected, and officials came up with an alternative option, like a 4-lane bridge. Now, planning out major bridge projects isn't like planning out a backyard treehouse. It's a complex process that involves countless experts and considerations. First, they had to choose the perfect location. This wasn't just about finding the narrowest part of the Patapsco River. They had to consider things like, how would the bridge connect to existing roads? What would be the environmental impact? And how would it affect the shipping traffic in the busy port of Baltimore? Then came the design phase. The engineers had to answer some tough questions. How long should the bridge be? How high should it be to allow ships to pass underneath? What materials should be used to ensure it's strong enough to handle heavy traffic, but also flexible enough to withstand winds and weather? And how wide should it be to accommodate future traffic growth? By 1971, they decided on a steel continuous truss bridge. A continuous truss bridge is a type of truss bridge that spans across 3 or more supports without hinges or joints. This design distributes live loads across all spans, using less material than individual trusses. These bridges have been widely used since the 19th century. The bridge was designed to be approximately 8,636 feet long. To put that all into perspective, that's roughly 6 Empire State Buildings laid end to end. And it was going to be the 3rd longest bridge in the state of Maryland. But why call it the Francis Scott Key Bridge? Well, Francis Scott Key was the author of the Star-Spangled Banner, which later became the U.S. national anthem. Key wrote the poem after witnessing the bombardment of Fort McHenry in Baltimore during the War of 1812 from a ship anchored a few feet away from where the bridge was located. By naming the bridge after Key, the planners were connecting this modern marvel to Baltimore's rich history. With the plan finalized, it was time to start building. Construction began in 1972, and let me tell you, this was no small feat. Building a bridge of this size was like conducting a massive orchestra, with countless moving parts that all needed to work in perfect harmony. The bridge was designed by these Baltimore engineering firms, J.E. Greiner & Company, Singstad, Keyhart, November, and Herka, and Baltimore Transportation Associates. The general contractors for the project was the Pittsburgh Des Moines Steel Company, and the team in charge of putting it all together was the John F. Beasley Construction Company. Hundreds of workers, from engineers to welders to concrete specialists, all played crucial roles in bringing this bridge to life. Throughout the construction process, the teams faced numerous challenges. Imagine trying to work on a massive structure in the middle of a river. They had to contend with changing water levels, strong currents, and unpredictable weather. There were also logistical challenges. How do you get tons of steel and concrete to the middle of a river? How do you coordinate the movements of massive cranes and barges in a busy shipping channel? It was a complex dance that required precise timing and coordination. After years of planning and construction, the big day finally arrived. On March 23, 1977, the the Francis Scott Key Bridge was officially open to traffic. This day wasn't just about the opening of a bridge. It was the dawn of a new era for Baltimore's transportation network. That morning, Harry Hughes, the then Secretary of Transportation for the state of Maryland, manned the toll booth to collect the first 75-cent toll. But the opening of the Francis Scott Key Bridge wasn't just a feel-good moment. It marked a significant improvement in Baltimore's infrastructure. Commuters who had spent hours stuck in traffic now had a new route across the Patapsco. Trucks carrying goods to and from the port had a more efficient path. The Baltimore Beltway, that vital artery circling the city, was now complete. For businesses in the area, the bridge opening was like a shot of adrenaline. Suddenly, different parts of the city were more accessible. This new route promised to boost economic activity, making it easier for people to get to work and for goods to be transported. Now that we've seen how the Francis Scott Key Bridge came into being, let's talk about why it was so important. This wasn't just another road across a river. The Key Bridge quickly became a vital artery for Baltimore's transportation system. For commuters, this was a game changer. Let's say you lived in the suburbs south of Baltimore in Anne Arundel County, but worked at the Bethlehem Steel Mill at Sparrows Point on the north side of the Patapsco River. Before the Key Bridge, you might have had to drive through the city center or through the harbor tunnel, battling traffic all the way. Now, you could zip around the Beltway and cross the river with ease. This didn't just save time, it reduced stress and improved quality of life for thousands of Baltimore area residents. But it wasn't just about personal vehicles. The Key Bridge played a crucial role in the movement of goods. Baltimore has always been an important port city, and effective transportation is the lifeblood of port operations. The bridge made it easier for trucks to move cargo to and from the port, boosting Baltimore's economic competitiveness. This also provided a way for trucks carrying hazardous materials to take a shortcut over the bridge instead of either driving through the city or around the Beltway, since hazmat loads were not permitted in the tunnels. The bridge's impact extended beyond transportation. It influenced patterns of urban development in the Baltimore metro area. Areas that were once considered remote or hard to reach suddenly became more accessible. This led to new residential and commercial developments, reshaping the city's geography. In essence, the Francis Scott Key Bridge became more than just a physical connection between two shores. It was a connector of communities, a facilitator of commerce, and a symbol of Baltimore's ambition and progress. Now, you might think that once a bridge is built, the job is done. But in reality, maintaining a structure like the Francis Scott Key Bridge was a never-ending task. It's like owning a car. You can't just drive it for years without changing the oil or checking the brakes. From the day it opened, the Key Bridge required constant attention. Think about it. The bridge was constantly under stress. It had to bear the weight of thousands of vehicles every day. It was exposed to all kinds of weather, scorching summer heat, freezing winter cold, heavy rains, and strong winds. All of these factors could potentially damage the bridge over time. One of the most common maintenance tasks was repairing the road's surface. Just like any road, the surface of the bridge would develop potholes and cracks over time. Another important aspect of maintenance was the bridge's structural components. The steel beams and concrete supports that held up the bridge needed to be regularly inspected and sometimes repaired or reinforced. This often involved complex engineering work, sometimes carried out high above the water or even underwater. Despite these efforts, maintaining a large and complex structure in a harsh environment was an ongoing challenge. As the bridge aged, the maintenance needs became more frequent and more expensive. This is a common issue with aging infrastructure, not just in Baltimore, but across the United States. There were also evolving safety standards to consider. What was considered safe when the bridge was built in the 1970s might not meet the stricter standards of the 21st century. This meant that ongoing upgrades and modifications were necessary to keep the bridge up to code. After the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001, a study on the Key Bridge commissioned by the state of Maryland found the structure to be vulnerable to attacks by bombing and ship impacts and recommended countermeasures in 2002 and 2004. The countermeasures named in the report to protect against a ship impact was standoff pier protection, or dolphins. The Key Bridge did have dolphins, but they were to the standards of 1977 when ships were 800 feet in length by 65 feet wide and had a cargo capacity of 1,000 to 2,500 TEUs. The MV Dali is 984 feet long by 185 feet wide and had a capacity of 9,971 TEUs. As we know now, the upgraded safety measures were not put in place. The report goes on to mention possible solutions should the bridge collapse, one of which being a 25-mile detour. If you would like to read the heavily redacted reports for yourself, please see the links in the description below. Now we come to the dark chapter of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. On March 26, 2004, the unthinkable happened. The MV Dali left the port of Baltimore that morning at 12:44 a.m., bound for Colombo, Sri Lanka. After the ship was under its own power in the channel, it suffered a complete blackout at 1:24 a.m. and began drifting in the channel. At 1:27, the ship issued a mayday call, informed the Maryland Department of Transportation that the ship had lost power and might collide with the Key Bridge, and requested traffic to be stopped on the bridge. At 1:27 and 53 seconds, the Maryland Department of Transportation Authority Police Dispatch requested officers to stop traffic in both directions. At 1:28 and 9 seconds, the last moving vehicle leaves the bridge, but 8 members of a road maintenance crew are still on it. At 1:28 and 49 seconds, the bridge, which had stood for over 45 years and carried millions of vehicles safely across the Patapsco River, was struck by the MV Dali, and a few seconds later, collapsed. All 8 members of the road maintenance crew fell into the water. 2 of the men were rescued shortly after entering the water. The other 6 maintenance workers sadly lost their lives that evening. It was a shocking and tragic event. In an instant, a structure that had been a part of Baltimore's skyline for generations was gone.
We come to you on air right now with major breaking news out of Baltimore this morning. As you see, we've had confirmed by the MDTAA a major ship has crashed into the Key Bridge. And as you see from this video shared by a viewer on X, the Key Bridge has come tumbling down.
In the aftermath of the collapse, investigations were immediately launched to determine the cause. Teams of engineers, safety experts, and investigators combed through the wreckage and pored over maintenance records, trying to piece together what had gone wrong. In the wake of the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse, Baltimore faced a monumental challenge. How do you replace a structure that was so integral to the city's transportation network? The answer? Carefully, thoughtfully, and with an eye towards the future. The process of rebuilding began almost immediately, but it wasn't just about replacing what was lost. It was an opportunity to reimagine what a 21st century bridge could be. After months of deliberation, a $73 million contract was awarded to Kuwait Corporation for pre-construction and design work. The rebuilding of the Francis Scott Key Bridge is more than just a construction project. It's a symbol of Baltimore's resilience and a commitment to learning from the past while building for the future. But the impact of this project extends beyond just replacing a fallen bridge. It's spurring a broader conversation about infrastructure in America. The collapse of the Key Bridge served as a wake-up call, highlighting the urgent need to invest in maintaining and upgrading our aging infrastructure. The story of the Francis Scott Key Bridge is more than just a tale of concrete and steel. It's a story about people. The visionaries who planned it, the workers who built it, the commuters who relied on it, and the communities that were shaped by it. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the history of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. I hope this video has given you a new appreciation for the incredible structures that surround us and the ongoing work required to keep our cities moving forward. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Until next time, I'm Evan, signing off.